Hi, I'm Rue.
Hi, I'm Janel. Welcome to episode 5 of Cocktails and Compliance, live from ResMania in Plano, Texas. All right.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. So we are super excited to have some guests with us today. Someone, possibly Michael Dunn, called them our guest drinkers, but they're our guest speakers. So we are super excited to introduce you guys. Stacy Day, who is with Karen Graham Consulting, and Jenny DeSilva, who is with DeSilva Housing Group. Rue and I have known these ladies almost as long as we've known each other. So there is a whole ton of affordable housing knowledge here. So we are so excited.
And some really good stories.
Okay, those are later. We're telling those later at the party, Rue. We had to get Jenny to simmer down. Jenny was at a table with some clients last night, and they were like, we have heard so many stories. I'm like, damn it, Jenny, stop. So I'm like, that's for later. So as always, we have a special cocktail for Cocktails and Compliance. And because we are at ResMania, we have ResMan Blue Margaritas.
Yay!
Woo! So shout out to our marketing team for hooking us up. I believe you're in the cool kids session. We're the only session with margaritas at the moment. So congratulations for choosing wisely. So we have a ton of things that we want to cover today. So let's get started. What's our favorite topic to kick off with, Rue?
Oh, 203A.
Tracks 203A. 7 years in waiting. We're still waiting. So we always like to give an update on that. And as usual, our update is there's no update. Thanks, HUD. So they've been busy doing some other things. I don't know. I did hear the HUD secretary had a hearing today, so maybe she was talking about that. She didn't care about 203A. That's cool. Larry Keys, who was our speaker earlier today, he's with NAMA. He is Director of Government Affairs. I was like, Larry, did you make it to the keynote? And he said the HUD secretary had a hearing. I had to go listen. We're like, you get a pass. So we'll see. 203A, when we hear about it, you'll hear about it. That's how that works. So the latest thing that has happened since our last podcast is the 2022 income limits were released.
Shameless ResMan plug. ResMan automatically updated them 2 days after they went out from HUD.
And there's our drinking game for today.
The drinking game for the day.
So we decided the drinking game is, as usual, every time Rue does a shameless plug, everybody takes a sip. So please participate. She talked about how we do this automatically.
Show of hands, how many of you all saw a significant jump in the dollar amounts on your income limits?
Enjoy them now, because you probably won't have them next year.
Right.
That's kind of a downer.
That was, God, Stacy.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I know, just everybody has to take a drink.
Have another sip.
Better.
That was depressing, Stacy.
Downer.
Yeah. How many of you updated your HUD income limits manually because it's fun and you did it because that's what you're used to doing? Anyone? No.
Yes.
All right. Yay. Faith said she didn't do it because that's why she has ResMan, because we did it for her. So yay. Thank you, Faith. Thank you, Mansamar. All right. So these income limits came out on April the 18th. I think within, 2 days?
Seriously, 2 days. I had an email that they had updated them on
Demetra's
my
in the back nodding her head.
Yep.
Demetra says yes. Within 2 days, we had it all loaded up in there for you guys. So
I wasn't kidding when I said shameless ResMan plug. I got the email 2 days later.
that's true. That's right, because your demo site got updated as well. Rue didn't have to do her demo site. So yay for Rue. So Stacy is our tax credit expert. Stacy is all things tax credit. Jenny is all things HUD. So we're very well rounded up here today. So Stacy, tax credit income limits, those generally have different effective dates and implementation dates, right?
So they're usually the same as HUD.
But you have a longer time period.
We have 45 days to implement them, and they can be very complicated. So prior to HERA, it was nice and simple, right? We just used the Section 8 income limits. That's all you used. After HERA, it depended on your placed in service date.
What's HERA?
Welcome to my world, Stacy. She does this to me every episode.
The Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008,
Thank
right?
you.
So at that time, we were starting to see decreases in income, which had not happened. Section 8 said, hey, we've got to reduce this. On the tax credit side, we said that's going to crush us, right? Because our rents are tied to our income limits. So if income limits started going down, our rents would start going down. So financially, that was not going to work. They also put in hold harmless. So not only did we get the HERA income limits in 2008, so depending on your place in service date, you were eligible for them or you weren't. And then they put in hold harmless on top of that, saying once your income limits hit a certain floor, they never have to go down. So, I mean, there are flow charts dedicated to this. And then we'll throw in, if you're in a rural area, you can use the national non-metro as long as you don't have bonds, right? This makes me want to drink. I feel like
I was going to say, you just wore me out.
everything
wore me out.
I'm talking about today, I was like, they're going to want to drink when I'm done, which is pretty normal for me, right?
I wasn't going to go there,
And,
but you did.
I know, it's fine.
I'm just happy you're here today. Cause,
I am too.
Okay.
In like an afternoon drinking session even. That's better. So when you guys talk about how great it is to have those income limits just published, to know that your software is going to do all of that, that you don't have to say, what was my hold harmless? I mean, you might have to go back to income limits from 2012, right, to see what is working. So to have all of that done and automated, and then when we talk about average income and we're at 20 to 80%, I mean, there's so many variables that it really is to just say it's there for me. Hours of free time. Right? Like you are not working on the weekends. You're not working at midnight. Like it's just there for you. So I think it's really exciting.
We think it's exciting too. So let's move on quickly to special claims. So one of the things that we've found in talking to some of our customers is they don't file special claims as often as you would think that they would. And especially given that this is an industry where you can't just increase your rents because you feel like it or the market conditions dictate that, you don't really have a lot of opportunities for additional income for your property. So, Jenny, tell me what you're seeing with special claims with some of your customers.
Well, I'm seeing a kind of a renewed interest in learning how to submit special claims. With the HUD, dwindling budget, there are certain program attributes that are going to be on the chopping block, and I personally think special claims is one of those. So I advocate for owners to take advantage of that money while it is available because it will eventually go away. Creating a special claim, be it for regular vacancy or unpaid rent and damages, can be a little laborious at times if you are having to gather documents and manually create those forms for a submission. So I'm wondering if there's a solution out there that makes that process easier.
It's time for another shameless ResMan plug.
Drink.
So ResMan will actually find available units that are claim eligible for you within the system and pre-populate the fields on the form, grossly reducing the time that you have to create a submission to go out and capture that money that's available for you on the table. So if you are strategic about it, you do it every 6 months so that you maximize your claim submission for the deadline timeframes. Knock it out in, twice a year. I never say, during your slow time because that doesn't exist in an affordable property, but on a schedule where you have fewer recertifications this month and then 6 months later, knock out those special claims. That's an important little boost to make up some of that rental income that you've lost as a result of individuals that somehow got the memo that during the moratorium and the pandemic that they just didn't have to pay rent.
Also, just so you know, if you are using special claims, ResMan keeps track of how much money is actually available for you to submit claims for.
Right. So you can quickly look at it and say, if it's, if you've got a claim for $4, that's not worth your time, but if you've got a claim for $4,400, that's a worthwhile task.
How hard is it to put together the special claims packet that you have to submit?
The first one is always the hardest, but through repetition, they get easier. And a lot of contract administrators will post checklists that are, specific to what it is they like to see in terms of backup documentation. It's not hard to gather it. It's more of a tedious process. So to the extent you can have these forms auto-populate, that saves you a lot of time.
So vacancy claims. Yeah, I mean, that's an easy one. And especially if you're, not that HUD Properties often have time finding people to come in and rent units, but it does happen depending on the area that you may be in, if you're in a rural area or something like that. So yeah, by all means, if you keep an eye on those vacancy claims and file those. So let's switch topics and go to tax credits here for a minute. So the average income test, you guys heard us talk about this earlier in the product highlight reel, that's something that we've added to the product. But Stacy, there's a lot of misconceptions. And when it first came out, in theory, it's great. It sounds great, right? You get that opportunity to lease to a broader demographic, right? Broader income limits, and you can get higher rents on your property if you can lease to an 80% and a 40%, you average to 60, right? But what we're hearing from owner agents and developers is developers are very gun shy to do this at the moment. So talk to us about what you're hearing.
So I'm just curious, how many of you have tax credit properties? Okay. So one of the things that I think is really important to note with this is that the way states are writing their QAPs is basically going to force developers to use the average income set aside because they're going to issue points for it. And if there is a set point that you can get for a new deal, a developer is not going to be able to overlook that, or they're not going to get that deal. Right. So this is something that we all need to be aware of and need to make sure we know what the risk is. And this is, I feel like, going to be like shameless plug city for this discussion because this is complicated and there's a huge risk for credit loss, meaning all of your credits. And so just to sort of quickly talk about what the average income test is. We've always had, unless we were in New York City, two set-asides, 20/50 and 40/60. When the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018 was passed, it gave us a third minimum set-aside, which is the average income test. And it is average income. I think in the beginning, people were calling it like income averaging, which is something completely different. So just going on the record right now that it is the average income test. And it did allow for a broader range of leasing units. So you can go in 10% increments from 20% to 80%. And if you have ever been on a project where you've had to tell someone who's like $1 over the max, right, you make too much money. And they look at you like, I make $26,000 a year. No, you make $26,001 and we consider you too wealthy to live here, right? It's a terrible thing to have to do. And so this average income is going to give us that wider window to lease. And it's also going to be really helpful for those acquisition rehabs that we're doing for REIA deals and that we're doing with Section 8, right? That is the reality of we're preserving that housing. And so now when you have someone who is over income at one of these deals, the developer doesn't have to say, well, do I need to pay them a lot of money to leave or just not take my credits? And that was really what we were faced with before. This test is a little bit different in that there are two benchmarks that must be met. You must have a minimum of 40% of your units that are at the owner designated, and that word is really important for this discussion, the owner designated income levels of that 20 to 80%, and your overall average has to be at 60%. So if you had a 2-unit project, one unit's at 20%, one unit is at 80%, your average is going to be 50, right? So you've met that test. So you average those together. But it is important to note that, as you've mentioned several times, this is a state program. And so states in all their infinite wisdom pretty much said, well, we're definitely going to change this up, right? We're just not going to make this simple. And so some of the things that we're seeing with this set aside are you can't have any market rate units in a lot of states because they find the rules so complicated that to even throw in a mixed income property, they're like, no way. And I think it's because we don't have any state agencies here, do we?
No, you're safe. Keep going.
It
never hurts to check.
Is because they're fearful, right? Like they're going to have to become experts and they're like, well, if we just get rid of that risk, like we'll make our life easier. And so we're seeing no market rate units allowed, saying you can't do it on a re-syndication. They're limiting the number of set-asides. So they say, well, you can go from 20 to 80, but you can only pick 4 of those numbers, right? Because it's just too much to keep track of. They're making you do full research on 100% deals, right? So extra paperwork. And they're sometimes charging extra for monitoring. So they say, well, if you pick this, then we're going to charge you money because we have to think harder to like audit your files, right?
But if you don't pick this, you may never get any more credits.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it's a very interesting like double-edged sword with that, right? Like because they're going to get that money. And then some of them have taken a step, and I think this is interesting because we talk about how many deals are getting project-based units, right? So you have that PBRA, and we know that that rent is usually going to be higher than the tax credit rent. And so developers have said, I'm going to take a whole bunch of those 30% units, and then I'm going to take a bunch of 80% units, and I'm going to put all of my project-based units in the 30% units. I'm going to collect a whole lot of rent there, and then I'm going to collect a whole lot of rent on my 80%, right? So they're like, it's a cash windfall. And so states have said no to that. So again, complicated program, but then the IRS came out with proposed regulations in October of 2020, and this is where things have really gotten ugly. Industry experts actually testified to Congress for hours on end saying why these proposed regulations were just going to really tank this new set aside. One of the things that the proposed regulations say is that once you have established a set aside, it can never change from that unit. If your top floor unit is a 20% unit, and you have someone that comes in and they are disabled, they're on SSI, they say, I need a ground floor unit. And you only have a ground floor unit that's an 80%, you would not be able to switch it with your 20% that was on the top floor. So clearly you can see how that would create some really significant issues with things. It would not work well with other programs. So as we're marrying all of these programs, it wouldn't allow you flexibility. It would conflict with its own tax credit rules of swapping status when units transfer. So that in itself is pretty problematic.
I will say later at the party, maybe after she's had another cocktail, those states that are saying this is what we need you to do, she'll probably tell you which ones they are later.
That's right. You tell me where you work.
Find Stacy later.
I'll tell you if that's the state to be on the lookout for.
Yeah.
But the second thing that was in there, and I think this is what everyone is so scared about, where we're talking about investors saying, I'm not going to do this, or owners saying, I'm not going to do it. And that is the interpretation that the IRS has presented for if you have non-compliance. And essentially, so we talked about we had that 20% unit and that 80% unit at our project. And so if you had non-compliance in your 20% unit, right? You accidentally moved in somebody who was overqualified. We try to avoid that, right? But sometimes it happens. Then what the IRS is saying is, well, that unit comes out of your average. So now you don't get to average 20 and 80. You only average 80. And now you have fallen below your minimum set aside. When you fall below your minimum set aside, you lose all credits for the entire year. If you fall below that minimum set aside in year one, you lose all credits forever.
So is this the falling off the cliff?
This is the cliff test that everyone talks about that says if you make a mistake, you're going to be losing millions of dollars. And so, of course, owners and syndicators are saying, we're not going to take that risk. We're not going to invest in this. They have literally said, we're not doing these deals because we're so fearful that one mistake will cause an issue. And this is where, when we talk about software, how crucial this is to making sure that something is keeping track of that, right? If you have set-asides from 20 to 80% and you need to always be averaging 60, if you don't have something tracking that for you, then you could have some really serious implications.
Ooh, shameless ResMan plug.
Is there something that can do that for us?
Oh my gosh, if only. If only someone thought of that.
Our software actually tracks all of this for you.
So to further segue the challenges with the blended properties, we're also seeing state agencies that are saying, in order to be competitive for credits, we're going to throw this little element in and say, oh, you also have to have just a few PRA 811 units at your site. Show of hands, how many of you guys have any 811 units at your site? Okay. How many of you may not know you have 811 units?
I feel like the number is high.
Okay. Yes.
It's the ones that started drinking. They're like, I don't know if I have it.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
So the individuals who are negotiating the application agree to have these 811 units. Whether they realize it or not, the site staff has just committed to learning all the rules on HUD compliance, leasing and occupancy for a small segment of 4 to 6 units or so at their site. Then all of a sudden you have entered the HUD arena, which I think is glorious, but might be a little terrifying for somebody who has just exclusively done tax credits. So that's where it becomes crucial operationally for your compliance tracking, to have a software that says, okay, these are the rules that we're going to follow on the TIC. These are the rules that we're going to follow on the 5.9. And we understand the differences because those figures are not always going to be the same. This is not just throw a few extra pieces of paper in the tenant file. There's a lot of program distinctions between those two. And now you've signed on to jump on that learning curve for understanding HUD multifamily compliance for a small segment of your units. So it really helps to have some type of program that kind of keeps you on the particular track for that type of file.
And the flexibility to maintain compliance with both of those, because that isn't something that everyone can do, to say, this is how we're calculating HUD income, this is how we're calculating tax credit income. Instead, they say, just figure out how to make it work. Do a manual correction. And that's not where we should be, right?
Are y'all thirsty? Another shameless ResMan plug. ResMan calculates the income correctly for both the TIC and the 5.9.
Two different income fields.
Two different income fields.
Cheers.
If anybody's seen me demo it, we demo it.
So, Jenny, I truly feel for those people. And Stacy, you've been in this position too, where you have someone on a property that has always been conventional and suddenly they find themselves in the tax credit world. Or to Jenny's scenario, you know tax credits and suddenly now you have this HUD contract and now you've got to figure out all of these HUD rules. What's the best thing that you could tell those sites to do? I mean, it's overwhelming. As we started looking at our UX refresh, and Rue and I were talking about the certification workflow, and for fun, I shared the 4350 with our UX designer, and he was like, well, thank you for giving me that 850-page document. That's fantastic. I'd love to read that in my spare time. So, I mean, how would you, that's a lot. Like you said, they already have full-time jobs running the property. They understand tax credits. What's the best way for them to get up to speed without reading that ginormous document?
Well, I would say partnerships are key and staying engaged. There's a lot of vendors that you can pick out there, but the ones that are passionate about affordable, that are in the discussions that lead up to specifications that dictate how your software works, it's really key that you find software partners that are in those discussions, because we see this quite a bit with RAD conversions right now. I don't know if any of you guys have undergone a RAD conversion from public housing to project-based rental assistance, but that is not just a flip a switch. Friday, you're public housing. Monday, you're all of a sudden multifamily property. And you're going from PIC submissions to track submissions, 5.8s to 5.9s, and it is an agency overhaul that will rock your world. And if you don't have a vendor that kind of understands those nuances and is intricately involved in those discussions for recognizing how painful or how smooth that conversion process can be, it's going to make or break your conversion. I work with a lot of different vendors, but I can stand up here and tell you that these two are passionate about the industry and they've been involved in those discussions. They know the why behind why a software ends up doing what it needs to do to be compliant. Partnering with someone who's really passionate and engaged in those discussions makes a huge difference to you as the end user. You can also just be involved in the industry association. Get involved with NAMA or any of the other leading ages if you're in the senior or disabled client market. There's industry associations out there where it's our full-time job just to learn the regulations, to translate it to end users. And we're not worried about the folks that are in the room here. We're worried about the ones that are the ostriches with their heads in the sand that don't know what they just signed on for. So you've got a good team of people that really know the direction that the business is going, and you're going to benefit from their legwork.
We didn't even pay her for this.
Man.
We did not pay her for this.
She may have an extra cocktail later. I'm just saying.
It makes a difference, guys. It makes a huge difference. There's a difference between buying software and engaging in a relationship with a vendor that listens to their owners.
Yay.
Let's do a little cheers
Yay.
to ResMan.
Cheers to ResMan.
Cheers to ResMan.
I'm empty from all my shameless ResMan plugs.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, you are.
My mom said when I was little, Jenny, there's a reason God gave you one mouth and two ears. So the people who listen half as much as they talk are the people that you need to get engaged with. And these folks listen to their users. They really do. They really do.
Go figure roof finishers first. Okay. I think there's some more in the back.
Are y'all offended?
I think what you meant to say, are you surprised?
Well, I was thinking they might be offended on my behalf.
Oh, well. No, they know they're not offended.
It's a good try.
It was a good try. It was cute. So, Jenny, beyond that, and thank you for that, because
thank you.
We do take it seriously and are very passionate about it. But let's talk about training. And I know that both of you ladies work for companies that do a lot of training as well. And so, again, going back to that scenario where you've got someone who suddenly finds themselves in the wonderful world of affordable housing, or maybe some flavor of it that they weren't familiar with, what's the best way for them to go about getting trained or to partner with someone? I know I can tell you, when we have that situation, I always recommend that they contract with a third party, especially until they kind of get their feet wet, they get trained, because again, it's not something that you go to a training class and 3 days later you're like, I'm certified and life is good and I know everything about, HUD or tax credits. So what do you guys do for your clients that are new to this world?
Well, I think you said it best. The learning curve with HUD, it's not, 3 weeks of intense PowerPoints and all of a sudden you're a HUD know-it-all. It's a pretty extensive learning curve. And to the extent that you can kind of find a technique from a trainer that is acclimated to your learning style. I think most of you guys are visual learners. Most of you like to learn how to do a task by actually doing it hands-on yourself, because it can make perfect sense if somebody's sitting up there and telling you, well, this is what you do. It's really easy. But doing it yourself is the true test as to whether or not you understood the logic and the methodology behind it. And so hands-on training is really important. Having a cohesive software product that will do the little things behind the scenes that you don't even recognize that it's doing, but you sure appreciate, because God forbid you get into a situation where you have no electricity and you have to sit in front of a resident and explain to them exactly how you calculated their rent.
Fun fact, that's how we had to learn.
Yes.
By the way, we had to do it by hand first.
Yes.
So, and you need to know how to do it by hand to test it, too. I know I dated myself. I did it by hand.
We owe it to the residents to be able to give them an explanation on how you came up with their rent. And so finding trainers and support staff that this is what they do. She knows tax credits. I know HUD. I couldn't sit up here and talk to you about tax credit. It's way over my head. But you partner with people who know it and know it well.
And I think making sure that they're putting it in a way that is what you do every day, right? I mean, you can read the 4350 all day long, right? You can read your state manuals, but what does that mean with your processes, right? How do you take that and put that into your leasing? Because you have the whole piece of property management operations that has to be done, but how do you work in those compliance processes? And I think when we were talking about electronic signatures, a lot of people were like, I don't know why I'm not using that. But if you sit down and say, well, so what is my day going to look like now, right? When somebody comes in and they're going to do an electronic application, what does my process look like? And then suddenly people get comfortable with it and it's part of your workflow. It's part of your system. And then I think it makes things a lot easier to know how that's all going to work together, because it's not so easy to just take that from a manual and say, what does this translate to? We have a lot of people that are getting into the tax credit world that were just straight conventional, and they don't understand that there are very specific questions that need to be on your application. They think that a market rate application that's one page is going to allow you to certify a HUD or a tax credit resident, right? And we're like, no, we're talking pages and pages, right? Looking at all of that is really crucial with your processes.
So let's go back a minute to the average income test and thinking about a property. And we were talking with a client a couple of weeks ago in a state that says you have to select this. And there's a whole debate about fixed and floating designations, like we talked about it a minute ago. So if you're a site and you're in a state and you're doing a deal and you suddenly find yourself going down this average income path, whether you like it or not, I mean, how can they learn more about it? How can they best navigate those waters?
Find someone to help you with training. Without a doubt, read what your state says, because what you do in Georgia is not going to be what you do in North Carolina. So definitely engaging with your state, making sure that you attend a training to have a concept of what it is. Chances are your syndicator is actually going to require you to have a written plan. There are very few syndicators that will do an average income deal without a company having a formal plan for how they are going to treat every unit, every designation, every file approval for an average income. So you're actually going to be forced to learn about it, whether you want to or not. And then without a doubt, again, having software that is going to walk you through it, because you need something to have that second set of checks and balances in order to be able to make sure all of those numbers line up.
All right. Switching topics on us again here. So one of the things that Rue and I have been talking about is we go to different conferences and we talk to our clients and people out in the field. And we've talked about it earlier in some other sessions today too, is staffing challenges. And certainly the affordable industry isn't immune to that, just like we're all dealing with that, right? So tell me what you guys are seeing in terms of your clients and staffing challenges that they're having, and maybe how they're, working to retain or attract their employees.
Well, again, talking about electronic signatures, I've worked with companies where we've had HUD Properties, and nothing against HUD, but
Jenny's going to smack you.
Most people that work on a HUD property, I think the average age is like 82. Wow. Right? I mean, it is just like when you look at it.
Sorry, not speaking to the people in the room.
Not you.
Not you.
Please
She's talking about the other people that aren't here.
The people that aren't here. It really is challenging. I mean,
average, y'all are low guys.
Yes, everyone that is not here, that is not young and beautiful in this room. I'm talking about everyone that's not here. Don't throw your drinks at me. But it is a challenge, right? And we talk about technology, and I mean, HUD properties are not always like, sexy and desirable. And, people are like, I definitely want to work there. Not only did she
call him old, she called him ugly.
Wow.
I mean, right.
Raise a glass for the Hudsters in the room.
Wow. Cheers to you, HUD people, for having to hear that. Sorry.
She just said back there, I'm going to smack you. Did you see? She was like,
I'm pretty sure she said we had.
She's going to find you later. Okay. We're going to have to walk you out of the room.
She was like, I'm going to hit you.
Okay. I think what she's trying to say is there's the potential for some intellectual knowledge to be exiting the industry, because
that's the way you could say it.
Because they're past the retirement age.
I said it better.
Because the lifers are beginning to consider retirement. And so we are faced with the introduction of a younger generation that will be managing these properties that tend to be more tech savvy. They're not afraid of the digital processes. So to the extent that we can kind of tap into that energy from the millennials a little bit, then let's work that, use that to our advantage. I would say on the HUD side,
I'm going to just turn my microphone
on the better side.
I would say people already turned it off for you. Sorry.
There are some benefits to outsourcing some or all of your compliance tasks, but there's also the benefit of, assigning some tasks to your site staff, especially if they're relatively green to the industry, and bringing some of those centralized tasks into, a home office. That doesn't mean that you're committing to that work environment or that structure permanently, but that can enable you to learn the program if you're relatively new to it, and then reevaluate what you have on kind of an asset management kind of style with the sites at a later date. So,
anybody outsource any compliance here? Anybody? Yeah?
Yeah.
Third party?
And with electronic applications and submissions, because what we're seeing is sites that just have no staff, right, for weeks or months on end as they're trying to hire someone. So you have someone who's filling in a day or two here, right, and your vacancy loss is just going up and up, or maybe you're not able to process your ARs, so your subsidy is getting behind. There's so many challenges with that. But when people are able to submit those documents electronically, you can have someone that's not physically on that property processing those files, right? They're getting access to those pay stubs, to those printouts, to all of those things that they're able to upload, and somebody can keep things moving from afar. And I think that is going to be something that's huge for us as we go forward.
I was just waiting for you to tell us about the young and sexy world of tax credits. So,
Well, I mean, clearly.
it's all good.
I mean, I wasn't done. You guys just made me stop.
By the way, one of the reasons we love her.
Right. Right. Wow. All right. Well, being cognizant of our time, and God knows what Stacy's going to say next. So, one of the things that Rue and I always like to talk about too is upcoming events. And so, like we said, we participate a lot in the industry. These two ladies participate a lot. That might be where we first saw them at some industry events.
At the bar.
Stacy, I'm going to kick Stacy under the table. I mean, she's not wrong, but I'm still going to kick her under the table. So let's talk about where you can see us next. First and foremost, we'll be at Sambuca down the road with all the rest of you tonight.
Yes,
So if you'd like to
dancing
talk
the
to
night
Stacy
away.
about her views on ageism and affordable housing, she'll be there. Just saying, she may need bodyguards, but we'll work on that. But next week, Rue is going to be on the road. Rue's going to be in Southern California. I will tell you, just recently, Rue and I did the whole East Coast. Yeah, Mark is like, Southern California represent. We did the whole East Coast, West Coast, East Coast. So I think last week we didn't know what day or time it was for
That's
a
coming
couple
up
of
in
days.
June again.
That is coming up in June again, because in June there is NAA in San Diego. So back to the West Coast. Mark's all excited in the back again. I mean, who doesn't love San Diego, right? What a great venue. And then we're immediately going to DC to the car meeting right afterwards. So Stacy and Jenny, where are you guys going to be?
So I'm actually seeing, an exciting shift in the kind of the balance between the online trainings and the live trainings. Most people are getting energized. They're ready to get back to face-to-face trainings, which from a trainer's perspective, I'm thrilled because on a virtual climate, it's really hard to ascertain whether somebody's picking up what I'm throwing down, because I can't see their face. And so
That was young and sexy for HUD, Stacy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Jenny's kind of hip.
Yeah. I actually do leading age webinars. I do collaborative live and virtual trainings for different AMA associations. I also do private events outside of the industry. I will actually be back here in Dallas in June doing a EIV class. I'm kind of all over the place wherever you all need me to be. I got teenagers now and I'm young enough to travel.
Fun fact, we just saw her in Spokane, Washington a couple of
That's
weeks
right.
ago, too.
That's
Am I
right.
going to see you in LA?
I'm at a different AMA PSW in an Arizona conference
Oh, okay.
in July.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Stacy, do you want to share where you're going to be?
No.
In timeout.
That's right. In a dark alley. I do lots with the AMAs as well. I have some things coming up with SAMA. We do a lot of private webinars and trainings, company trainings where people have had a lot of turnover. Even in the sexy tax credit world, there's turnover. And so we've been doing a lot of new hire trainings. We really try to get some specialized trainings, work with our clients, know exactly what they need. We do a lot of file reviews. So we'll actually sort of look at what's going on with that company and say, what do you need specifically? Where is your group struggling? And so, I'll just be around here and there.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are just about at time. So I want to thank all of you for being here for our first live podcast. And we hope to see you again later this evening.